My name's John Lees. I'm retired, well, some would say semi-retired, but I have a background in wind erosion, and I currently volunteer for helping scientists in CSIRO and also the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment. With all those collaborations, I'm very lucky to have access to a whole heap of information, and some of that I'm just summarising for you today. So today we're going to talk to you about increasing ground cover. Why we're interested in increasing ground cover is purely, from my point of view, all about soil conservation and reducing soil erosion. So the good news is soil erosion is decreasing. A recent paper was published that showed that the dust storms in the recent 2017 to 20 drought was about 20% of the 1940s droughts. So what's happened in the last few decades is we've seen a massive reduction in these dust storms. The dust storms are now being curtailed because those three things: the community attitude has changed towards working sustainably with the land, the drought policies are more targeted and are providing better support to people on the land, and also finally the land management practices have just increased dramatically in improvement. A lot of it's through technology, but a lot of it's just also driven by people wanting to do a better job and stop the erosion. So soil that we wish to keep in place performs its best when it doesn't get moved around. So as the soil sits there, the bugs get to know it, they get to eat the vegetation that's on the top of it, the carbon accumulates, more vegetation grows, the water comes, and the soil gets better and better. So the whole idea of sustainable management of soils is to keep feeding the bugs, so they need something to eat, and that's vegetation. And you don't want to kill the bugs, and things that kill bugs are things like stock trampling, where you disturb the surface. So the best way to keep your soil is to treat it with sort of kid gloves. Always keep vegetation on the top if possible, and that will keep it in place and that'll stop the erosion. Ground cover is made of dead stuff and green stuff. Together that's called total cover, and that's what protects your soils. There are two sort of numbers we need to remember. If you want to protect your soil from water erosion and you're on a gentle slope, you need about 70% of the surface covered in vegetation. If your soil is to be protected from wind erosion, you need about 50%, so half the surface. So in this landscape where we are today, most of the maximum cover occurs in July, August, and the minimum cover occurs in February. So what we've been able to do by looking at these patterns, if you have a look at some of the graphs, they show that the cover will sort of be maximising between 80 and 90%, and the minimum will be between 30 and 40%. So if that's the range of about 50% drop in a season, it's well to know that that's going to happen. In simple terms, if you have 70 to 80% ground cover in July, August, that will be enough to not go below 50% ground cover in the following summer. If you are below that sort of 70% level, the chances are you will be below 50% in the next summer, and that means there's a risk of erosion. So how do we measure ground cover? There's a method called step pointing, where you go out, you put a mark on your boot, you walk them down the paddock 100 steps, and you get an answer. The other way you can do it is with satellite technology. So since the late 80s, there have been satellites flying around, and they have been able to measure the amount of ground cover. Not only the total amount, but if it's dead, if it's growing, or if it's bare soil, those three fractions. So there's an app out at the moment, or a website, it's called GeoGlam Rap Map. Just put it into Google. So the satellite information is now freely available. You can also get the satellite information from other subscription services. SIBO Labs makes one available to people. There's one called Veg Machine, which is also available. But basically this information, there's lots and lots and lots of data, and the idea of Rap Map was to try and bring it all, to make it freely available, fully accessible, but also you can do analysis on it. So it's sitting there, it's waiting for you. If you want to use it, just click on the button and you can get access to the time series for the last 23 years at 500 metre resolution, or since 2016 at 30 metre resolution. So the big advantages of knowing in advance that the next summer is going to be possibly have a low ground cover is that it gives you time to make decisions. So in a farming system, you might be thinking about the number of cultivations you might do. You might think about destocking paddocks earlier. You might be thinking about, I really need to make sure that I use conservation farming methodologies which really maintain as much cover as possible. In the grazing systems, the only tool we really have is stock numbers. So if I'm going to reduce stock in this paddock, because it looks like it's going to be at risk, how am I going to do it? What's the most economically viable way of destocking at this time, knowing that it's going to have a problem next coming summer? Wind erosion is a natural process. Climate makes it harder to manage, but land management can mitigate its impacts. But mitigating the impacts requires making a planning decision, generally months ahead. Drought planning is not about doing something today, it's about making a decision. Probably what I'm suggesting now is in the previous winter, that it looks like the season has been poor. What am I going to do to avoid a problem in 6 months' time?